in a few minutes, we're going to start talking about some more of the operational things. So we'll be talking about the registry data hub and EIEPs and billing methodologies, and then how you can actually check information between the registry, the reconciliation manager, and EIEPs. But just to reinforce a couple of things. The registry itself is a database of record. The information in the registry is critical to the way the market actually operates. And information in the registry has three different owners. The registry only contains ICPs. It doesn't contain information actually about NSPs. It's actually only about ICPs. The key functionality of the registry is to facilitate consumer switching, to facilitate network switching, to facilitate MEP switching, and to prevent asymmetry of information. So it's providing transparency of information about points of connection. So it's a large database, and we were saying before about just how big this registry actually is. Now, other people rely on information that you actually provide to the registry. So if you're a distributor, you have ownership of certain fields. Those fields are then used by retailers, and they may be used by MEPs to actually carry out filtering and the deduction of information that then actually has a financial consequence in the electricity market and also in consumer invoices. So in the registry, we have timeframes. Timeframes in the code are not targets, they are maximums. If the registry gives you 10 business days to do something and you have the information within 1 business day, you should put it in the registry. If the registry allows you 5 business days, you don't wait till the 5th business day till you go and update the registry. Good practice is you should do it immediately. As soon as the information is there, it's available for people actually to use. Now, a couple of very strict points actually about the registry. Clause 11.2 of the code requires that information that you put in must be accurate, and if you don't, if it is inaccurate and you find it's inaccurate, you must correct it. If someone actually comes to you and says your address field is actually wrong, that's the incorrect address for an ICP, you have to correct that information. They come along and say, you got the price category code wrong because this is a domestic consumer, not a dairy shed. Similarly, you actually have to look into it and actually correct that information. If you don't act on the queries that you actually have from participants about your registry information, you may breach clause 11.2. So just remember there is a downstream consequence to everything that you put in the registry. But if you make a mistake, what can you actually do? Well, when you put information in the registry, it's automatically pushed out to everyone. You change something in the registry, anyone who has ownership of that ICP immediately receives that information, and they'll update it actually within their systems. So you need to correct errors actually in there, and the registry will allow you to correct errors. So you could determine that you've got a wrong address. The registry will allow you to go back and correct that address. The same goes for price category codes and loss category codes. But the code says you can't do it. It says you don't backdate these changes. So the choice you have is, do you breach clause 11.2 by allowing a market mistake to continue, or do you breach the backdating clause and go and actually fix the information that you may actually have incorrectly populated? So that's a choice you need to make, but the clause 11.2, I mean, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. I would always correct information. So some of the errors that might occur can pose significant difficulties because you can't change some things unless someone actually reverses out events. You might actually find that you've actually got an error there, and it requires you to reverse out 5 or 6 events in order to correct the error, and then you've got to correctly make them going forwards. There is no simple answer to that. the registry keeps audit trails, and when you reverse events going backwards, you're undoing them, undoing actually the registry process. You fix the error and you've got to rebuild the process actually coming forward. It's a function of the way the registry works at the moment. I have a little spreadsheet here. What I did was I took all the fields out of the registry and I said, okay, who owns this field? Who's responsible for actually populating accurate information into the field? What sort of participant is it? And what's a description actually of the field? Now, some of the descriptions in the functional specifications weren't that good, so I've actually rewritten them in here to something that's a bit more perhaps plain English. And then I said, if that information was inaccurate, what is the consequence? So this here just simply tells you what the consequence of making an error is. And then it says, in my view, and this is Ron's view of the world, is the error recoverable? And in some cases it might be a not entirely, it may be a no, it may be a yes. And then it says who receives the consequence of that error. So here's the participant that actually gets impacted. So distributor makes a mistake, here the trader and MEP actually gets impacted. And then I put another column on saying is the customer directly impacted. So in some cases it's yes, maybe, and no. But you might find it interesting just to have a little look actually through there to just get an idea about how what you do in market systems actually impacts other participants. One other important point, and we've mentioned register content codes and period of availability. So what are register content codes? They're defined in the registry functional specification in SD 020. Now, you can look that up and it might be of some assistance actually to you, but it's not a very good table. It doesn't really accurately describe what the registers are. I do have a better table actually of it, and if you'd like a copy, contact Sarah actually over here as well. And the table that I've got breaks down that list into what register contents code applies to a single meter or multi-register meters. But a register content code is a code that defines how what a meter register actually records. So when you look through it, it might have UN. UN just means uncontrolled. It might have CN. CN means that the distributor could exercise control of that register content code at any time. It might have a D or an N. And D means that it's for a 2-register meter and it's the day register. And if you got a D, you must have an N as well, which is the corresponding night register. So this table sets out all those combinations. Now, register content code actually appears in the registry. So if you look up an ICP in the registry and you go to the meter event and you decide to look at the detailed meter records, each meter or data storage device that's in there will have a register content code for the meter registers that are recorded. And it's telling you basically exactly what that meter register actually will record. You can use that to compare to your tariffs because you know that if you have an uncontrolled rate or if you have a rate that actually applies where you can exercise control at any time, you would expect to actually see the correct values applied to in your EIP ones actually to that. So the register content code sitting actually within the registry itself, you can access it, you can download all of your network, Jonathan, PR255 isn't it? Or you can go to a PR030 and download actually everything. Associated with the register content code, we have something called period of availability. So if we use POA, we don't mean price on application, we actually mean period of availability. And what period of availability is the minimum number of hours per day that electricity will be supplied by that meter register. So if we go back to uncontrolled, so we've got an uncontrolled meter register, We have UN, of course, for the register content code. What's the period of availability? 24, exactly. If we had a distributor who said to be eligible for this particular tariff, you must be prepared to actually forego electricity for up to 5 hours a day. The register content code would be CN, but the period of availability would be 24 minus 5 equals 19. So if you had that tariff, you would expect to see register content code in the registry of CN, period of availability is 19. You might have a single meter on an ICP, and you've got an uncontrolled supply going off into a premise. You've got a ripple relay actually connects to that metered supply and heads off into the premise. We have one of those. We have actually a register content code that we call inclusive. So inclusive just means that the meter register is recording controlled and uncontrolled consumption actually going through it. So you would expect to see IN there, but then for the period of availability, you would expect to see the minimum number of hours that the controlled supply is available for. Not 24. IN 24 is not a legal combination. The value will be between 1 and 24. Now, where all this falls over is some networks don't have a minimum period of availability. So they say, okay, well, we will supply you with electricity and we'll elect to turn your electricity on or off at any particular point in time, and we might turn it off for 24 hours, we might never turn it off at all. We're not going to say how long we're going to turn it off actually for. We don't actually have a register content code for that. Some of the problems retailers have is they take a guess, and they might guess 19, and the MEP might take a guess and they guess 17. And that then causes a problem for retailers because what they have doesn't actually match what's within the registry itself with their pricing plans. So one of the things we had referred to the standing data formats group was whether we need a default period of availability to actually use where there was no minimum period of availability stipulated actually by the distributor. So the question is, can we put validation on register content codes actually in the registry so that you can't populate IN24? And there would be other ones you might want to say you can't put D in unless you've got a corresponding N. And it might be that you can't put in D15 and N7, that it's actually got to add up to 24 hours. The answer is, well, yes, we could. We'd need to look at the feasibility actually of that and look at funding actually for it. But the registry could be used to support that type of functionality. But then alternatively, so could MEP systems. So you could also argue that MEPs could build the same validation in their system so that their system would actually reject that combination going in, so it doesn't even get into their system, let alone actually into the registry.
Yeah, I just thought I'd like to talk a little bit about the registry pricing fields, because these are the guys that the retailers really rely on in terms of charging their customer right. And they also really rely on it to try and pay you the right amount of money. Now, it doesn't actually matter whether it's an interposed or a conveyance agreement. Basically, the money flows through them and they make the call, to most degree anyway. So, and these are the key fields, of course, that they use in conjunction with the register content code and period of availability, which we're going to keep on banging on about, I'm sorry. But anyway, we'll move away from that slightly. So the key one here, of course, being the price category code. And the price category code combined with the register content codes is the key thing that is used to identify your tariffs. All right? And retailers have got mapping tables and so forth to try and make all this right, and because they don't have the money to spend on thousands and thousands of individual people looking it up. They try and make this thing work with computers. So they have lookup tables and bits and pieces. And the furrier the distributor price category code is, and especially the furrier the register content period of availabilities are, the harder it is to make that call. So that one's fairly clean. I'm not going to go too much on about the loss category code. We've sort of done that to death as well, but the code influences the loss factor. Loss factor impacts settlement and assists in pricing decisions. Installation details is an interesting field because it's free text. And my comment there is sort of tongue-in-cheek, but actually it's pretty much right. It's used, there are some agreements about what people will put in there, especially for unmetered load and so forth, but it's not well maintained. It's a free text field. It's not actually much use at all. And the number of ICPs I've seen with : in the just pricing details, it might as well not be there, frankly. And then there's the chargeable capacity. Now, the chargeable capacity is another one where, and it's one that people tend to forget about, but it's actually also really, really important, because any price category that uses a chargeable capacity, retailers really need to know about, because the chargeable capacity is usually a whopper. And if you get it wrong, you're going to lose a bundle. And if you get it wrong the other way, your customer's not going to be very happy either. So you really want to get it right. So this is sort of Coles to Newcastle, but the next bit is the things that where the rubber meets the road, right? Firstly, price category. It's a code, not a puzzle. I did warn the distributor that has those. They're all the same fixed charge, and basically that's a collection of various different tariffs, all rumbled in together. Now, imagine how many different combinations a retailer has to set up to try and manage that. All right? Don't do it, please. There's only one crowd that I know of that's doing it that I can think of. But you've got other things. You know, we've got the registry now splits out metering explicitly and network charges. So this is a bit of a hangback, where the network owner is also the meter owner some of the time. So now they've got the same price category for the network charges, but it's plus or minus a metering charge. Metering for retailers is generally handled via a different route. So when you suddenly start to bundle it into your network charges, not only do you have to work that in through your pricing, you've got to take it out of your meter billing invoices as well. Not particularly useful. And then my favourite, chargeable capacity. Sorry, this is a bit of a bugbear that I've always had. Chargeable capacity is there for a reason, and it's really, really, really important when it applies. And so people have tables, and they look for these things, and they look them up. And then you get a whole bunch of chargeable capacities that actually mean absolutely nothing. There is no chargeable capacity charge associated with them. 14, 15, 16, I mean, how you get on a 60 amp connection that range of kVAs, I'm not quite sure either, but someone will probably shout me down on that one. Maybe it's different voltages or something like that, who knows. So please, 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 only use the chargeable capacity field if there is a chargeable capacity that applies. Because otherwise, the four flaming retailers have to set up another whole table to say, all these mean nothing, ignore them. Or if it changes, they've got to set up things to say, oh, chargeable capacity's changed, better look at that one, could cost us something. So a bit of a plea. And then I'm going to apologise, you've had it 3 speakers in a row. It'd be really, really, really good if you can put the register content codes and your period availabilities on your pricing schedules. I won't say anything more, it's been banged on about heaps. And I think, okay, so registry, SFTP. If you are operating in the market, you will be looking at the registry, probably using the browser. If you're doing any volume transactions, you'll be sending CSV files down to the registry. And of course, at the 1st of January this year, it went from FTP to SFTP to make things secure. A couple of very good reasons for that. Directory structure, as we can see, when you get there, you've got the to reg, you've got the from reg. It's nice and clear. What happens is if you put a file into to reg, the registry picks it up, starts processing it. Once it's finished processing, puts it back in processed. If it doesn't like it, for some reason, it bungs it into reject. How many of you guys have actually looked in your reject folders? You might get a bit of a surprise. It's worth doing every now and again just to have a little look. And of course, anything that comes back through your from reg. Your systems will be doing these automatically, and you've probably got network people and people with pointy heads running systems, and you may or may not know about it, but you can also access these using an FTP client and put files down directly or not, as the case may be. And the other thing that's in there these days in the SFTP directories is your EIEP inbound and outbound folders. And this is going to be a little bit of a plug for using the hub. For those that haven't used it, it's got to be the easiest way of shifting stuff to any participant on the registry. All you do is you have the right file name, you drop it in the EIEP out folder, and the way I can remember it is it's outbound and inbound, because it's not obviously which way in and out is. Sorry, SFTP client program, WinSCP, FileZilla. There's lots of freeware out there that does the job. You do need to know your logon and your password, but once you've got them, you're away. Unless you specifically change them, they stay stable, not like the browser logons. And you have the hub. Now, the to reg, from reg, etc. directories, they go from the providers down into the registry and back out, and stuff happens, hopefully, on the registry. The hub skips past the registry and basically takes the file and drops it to whoever you've addressed it to. It does it quick, it does it efficiently, and it'll tell you that it's done it. As it tells you it's done it for in a number of ways. It can give you a confirmation file in your inbound folder. Thank you. And or using the supervisor settings on the registry, you can get it to send you emails to notify you so that your thing doesn't get clogged up with lots of files. Okay, and it'll do pretty much anything you want to send as long as you name it right. So if you've got lots of music that you want to send to a friend, you can, as long as they're a registry participant, you can probably do that too. Just zip them up, give it a file name, sender, electricity, receiver, a 7-figure value, and some people will recognize that as a gas code name, because I'm doing a bit on gas at the moment. Very unfortunate acronym, I have to say. A month year for nominally, this is around the EIEP files is what it's configured for, and that's the month that the EIEP file belongs to, but as long as it's year and month, it'll be accepted. And year, month, day is the day that you're sending it. There's a unique number, and then basically any suffix you like. Certainly text and zip work. CSV, I think, works as well. Yep, I think it's pretty much any suffix. So very useful tool for shifting stuff. A really, really good one for shifting secure stuff, because SFTP is secure. So your EIEP4 file that you're receiving actually has private information that is considered private information under the Privacy Act, something you actually have to send securely. That's what this is for. So, and it's easy to do. Just grab the files that you've pre-prepared, drop them in, whoosh, off they go. So a bit of a plug for the Registry Hub. Really great way of shifting information between participants. Not the least, of course, your EIEP 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, 12s. Oh, well, yeah, and we'll get to the list later. All right, so the other thing is that you can also, you don't have to use an FTP client. As long as your supervisor has enabled your access, so your supervisor logon has enabled your access, you can put and take files using the browser as well. It's nowhere near as quick or as efficient, but it is another way. Okay, so we know about the browser. We now know about SFTP and putting and taking files. You may or may not know that there is another way of accessing the registry, and that is via the Registry web service. In terms of hooking systems up together, so if you've got a call center where you're regularly requesting information from the registry, this is the puppy to use. Code it all up, and it just does it for you. So you put on whatever request information, you can get your system to do that without the CSR even having to raise a finger. As soon as they know who the customer is, or an address, that address can go down and bring back ICP search information. If it's got an ICP, you can bring back all the information for that ICP. Happens pretty quickly, and it happens without the CSR having to jump onto the browser. And it's in your system, the system's brought it back, it's accessible immediately for further processing. It's no cutting, pasting, no mistakes on other bits and pieces. Very powerful tool if you've got, especially if you've got a call center and you want to speed things up a little bit. I think the assessment we did when we were putting in the contact system was it was going to save us something like a minute per call if you were needing to access the registry, which I think for most, I'm told, is a really big gain for call centers. So just to let you know that it's available, you can access it manually to have a look at it. There is a, oh yeah, sorry, there is the website. It'll take you to the thing that the Jade has provided a test harness for it, which enables you to access the various methods that are available. And it's read-only, by the way. You put in an active browser logon and password, and it's available to you from there. This is the ICP search method, and we've got user, log on, and then basically exactly the same fields as you would put in the browser search. But you can code it all up and the system can do it for you. So just to let you know that it's available, and for the people that are using it, I think they love it. It's very reliable, so just be aware. Some distributors run call centers, faults and other bits and pieces that need to access the registry. Worth a look.